Some time ago I picked up this surface gauge. It's a Brown & Sharp 622. I think I got it off of an eBay lot with a bunch of other rusty stuff. I cleaned off the rust, stoned down the high points, lovingly lubricated it, and then proceeded to use it as a highly overqualified phone holder, among a few other potentially even more egregious use cases. While I continue to insult our machinist ancestors with my fancy whiz-kid phonomajig, they may find some solace in my appreciation of the effort and the care that went into the construction of this surface gauge, particularly into the construction of these swivel clamps. Similar to the, your standard indicator swivel clamps, what I need is some sort of setup that can hold not just a phone, but a DSLR camera to keep a union of very precise ghosts from insulting my lack of rigidity. I decided to recreate these elbows and use them as a sort of general purpose quick positioning system. The surface gauge can go back to being a surface gauge, which I've never used it as a surface gauge, but maybe someday, hopefully. The phone can go back on silent mode, where it'll safely never make or receive phone calls ever again. And I'll have a way to position my new to me camera. Once the stock was all cleaned up and squared, it came out something right about 1.4 inches. So since none of these dimensions are preset, I used that 1.4 inches as the nominal outside diameter of each half of the elbow. Here I'm drilling and reaming this center hole that accepts the threaded locking stud clamping thing, whatever, the thing that the knob connects to, whatever. I'm doing that on the mill because I really wanted some practice in moving between the mill and the lathe. This center hole does need concentricity between itself and the either recess or extension piece, the outside diameter of either of those respectively. So the better way to do this would have been to just throw this piece of stock in the lathe, center it using the outside edges, and then drill and ream the center hole. From there, turn the whatever feature you need to, and you're ensuring concentricity between the center hole and those other features. This first set of elbows will be used to position the DSLR camera, and I envision it getting a lot of different angles and some overreaching shots, a lot of leverage basically. These elbows need to be somewhat beefy. In particular, the rods in between them need to be thick enough that I'm not getting a lot of vibrations. I settled on a half-inch nominal diameter rod. The Brown & Sharp uses something closer to 3/8. If you watched the tool stand video I made a couple of weeks ago, you noticed that I made a system of rods there that essentially did the same thing that I'm doing here. The diameter of those rods is 0.45 inches nominally. The issue in using those rods directly is that I don't have a way to get that 0.45 inch bore hole without using the lathe. My CNC router would crap its pants looking at a piece of steel, and the lathe precisely boring that many holes to that depth, it's just going to be a lot of effort. I do have a couple of 7/16 reamers, and that's 0.4375 inches. I'd really like the two systems, the tool stand and these elbows, to be compatible, so I decided I'm going to modify the old tool stand rods. the rod dimension is really kind of the defining dimension for the rest of the project, because a lot of the other dimensions I'm making up as I go along. I wasn't necessarily planning to round over the bottom edge of my elbows the way the Brown & Sharp did, just because it'd be quicker not to. But I found that the clamping force that you need with all this extra material in the corners is just too much. And so it's actually important to remove a lot of this 90-degree corner here. So I just eyeballed in some rough cuts on the mill to remove the bulk of the stock. And then I went back in with some hand files to round it over more or less cosmetically. A slitting saw would have been ideal to cut in these clamping slit relief slot things. I don't own a slitting saw. Actually, I do now, but when I was recording this, I didn't own a slitting saw. So stay tuned for more slitting saw action. I ended up using a hacksaw. It functionally worked just fine. It's just that cosmetically it doesn't look great. Actually, I can move that on a bit too. The clamping rod that goes through the middle has 3 features on it. One end is threaded. I used number 10 by 32. Then there's a middle section that needs to be slightly smaller than 1/4 of an inch, just so when you're clamping it, the elbows don't bind on the rod itself. And then at the very end of it, I was going for a shrink fit. So the very end of it is slightly over 1/4 of an inch, so that I can shrink fit it into the one end of the elbow. Started off by replicating the Brown & Sharp clamping knob. During my prototype testing, I really didn't like it. You had to really crank on the thing to get enough clamping force. I think a lot of that is probably my machining tolerances just aren't good enough. So I scrapped that idea. Instead went digging through my scrap bin, and I found this adjustment knob that came off of an old industrial pressure regulator. It's just about the right size for this. The only issue is that it had this phallic shape on the front that needed to be cut off. The Tommy bar design was comfortable, it gives you a lot of clamping force. So I ended up replicating it for the second set of elbows as well. The table that I'm on is on its last legs, literally. One of the legs is about to fall off. So the whole thing's just kind of vibrating with the belt sander. Camera's walking away as best it can. It's probably sick of me yelling at it for not being at the right angle. Really like the contrast between the brass knob, the steel bars, and this brown oil finish on the actual elbows. This oil finish in particular didn't come out great, I wouldn't say, compared to the tool stand base that you can see in the background there. I've got some more experimenting to do. I'm happy with how they turned out. Tolerances could be a bit better, but still learning machining. This was really the first big project I've done with the new mill. Functionally, I don't have any complaints about it. It works better than I really expected it to. It's not exactly the quick change system that commercial tripods have, but they actually use the same 1/4-20 thread. So if I want to adapt this to use one of those quick change platform systems, it'd be pretty easy to do. I'd just mount it on top of this stud here that the camera is directly mounted to at the moment. I've got an old tripod that I pulled out of a junk heap that I want to restore that uses that quick change platform thing, and I'd like to be able to swap the camera between that and this setup quickly. Get just about any angle I want out of this. Can get overreaching shots. It's strong enough, rigid enough that I'm not getting a ton of vibrations out of it. I've currently got it on the stand that I made for the tool stand a while back, but I'd really like to have a dedicated stand for it as well, because the camera itself is a bit heavier than what I envisioned going onto the tool stand directly. So something with a bit more counterweight on the back of it would be nice. Next video will be recorded entirely with this new camera, new microphone. I'm excited about it. It'll be fun to be able to set up different shots than what I've been doing. In particular, a lot of overreaching shots, because I'm very limited on space. So being able to get overhead shots where I have a lot of space that's unused. We really don't use enough of our vertical space, if I can just go on a short rant. So if you want to see that, stick around. Doesn't feel right finishing a video without a single shot of parts spinning around on a piece of old painter's cloth, so here you go.